Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Paranormal Zone, where we look into the paranormal of all sorts, UFOs, mythology, cryptozoology, Wiccan, and whatever else is out there in the world of the paranormal. My co-host, Bob, who started this with me, will be back real soon. He's just finishing up. And my other co-host, Melody, she'll be filling in when we need her, and she'll be back with us soon too. We may end up doing this a three-host show, but we're not sure yet. But tonight I'm flying solo, so if I make any mistakes, you can yell at me over the line all you want. So I'm apologize ahead of time. I'm probably the shyest person in the world. But forget enough about that. Tonight, I'm going to introduce you a friend of mine who is, I call a true friend. We've been friends for years, a lot of times. He's been 42 years in the paranormal. Wow. That's almost as long as I've been alive. Whew, that's a long time. Oh, that sounds like yesterday, though. He's published, him and his wife, Eileen, have published 18 books. So without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend, Thomas D'Agostino. Tom, welcome to the Paranormal Zone.
Thanks. Awesome. Great to be talking to you again.
It is. This is a fun, we always have fun when we have you on, whether it's the TV show, the radio shows. It's always fun. And you've been doing this a long time, huh? 42 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I got into it when I was a kid, loving, just watching movies and everything. But I started actually studying paranormal in all kinds of different ways, sciences and stuff 42 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, 42 years. And then you got into something, you really took the paranormal to a different level, I would say. You've published 18 books. One of them, though, was a very interesting book. You did a book on vampires, if I remember correctly, right? Mercy Brown?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Vampires in New England.
Yes. So for people who are sitting at home all across the world, because we are international with this show, being a podcast, with Vampires in New England. When I first saw that book, before I knew who met you even, I'm like, this is fascinating. I've heard about Bigfoot. I've heard about Birdman. I've heard about Sasquatch, which is a Bigfoot. I've heard about all these other things out there, but I never thought about vampires in New England. What got you so interested in vampires in New England?
I grew up in Rhode Island. And, the famous Mercy Brown case and a few others. Rhode Island's like the vampire capital of New England. And, of course, New England's the vampire capital of the world, so Rhode Island's the vampire capital of the world. So, and it just was so interesting that these cases and things, like what really happened and why. And I started studying more and found out that this happened a lot. A very, very large amount of families were digging up their loved ones, looking for a spectral ghoul, which is what they thought it was, like the spirit of the body coming out of the grave and feeding on the family. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily like a Dracula type person, but a spirit. And they were exercising their loved one. They were digging them up, and they were cutting out the heart, liver, lungs of the suspected one and burning it to ashes and feeding the ashes to the sick. All because, they had tuberculosis or consumption. And it was just fascinating because not only was this a really cool thing of like the macabre and, horror and ghost story type stuff, but also a very, very unbelievable portion of history and legend and folklore.
That is very interesting. I did find that interesting early on, and I've heard your talks on the vampires, which is real interesting because really would think, England's old, New England's new, but we're the oldest part of the United States. But we don't go back for thousands of years. We go back hundreds of years, actually. We're getting ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country in 3 years. So, we're not that old compared to England and Scotland and Germany.
Right, yeah, actually, next year, April 19th, Concord is celebrating the 250th anniversary of the first shot heard around the world.
Yes, they are.
So, and you figure that in terms of, like you said, England and Scotland and France and all those other European countries, they go back, thousands of years. We're like nothing. But these people came from those countries and they brought the culture with them. And then their son was born here.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. And they brought their culture with them, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just find that the whole vampire thing and very, very interesting. And you really did, you brought that to the forefront, of the paranormal world around here. Yeah,
well, Michael Bell was one of the big influences. He was studying them way back, studying these ideas in the 70s with Professor McNally. And they had a few ideas, but he just kept going and going and going. And then I took off where I left off. I kept going. So even now, when I find things that are very strange and weird, I send them to him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Oh, wow, this is cool," because you can't find everything yourself. And so I feel like, wow, this guy helped me really, push me along and get into it, especially in the paranormal field, because he's not a paranormal investigator or a paranormal enthusiast that like a lot of people are. He's a folklorist, and he loves the vampire thing, though, because it really happened.
Right.
Hundreds, if not thousands of families were digging up their loved ones, looking for someone that looked like they had just fed, and they'd look, before they even died, they'd be bleeding from the mouth, coughing. They looked corpse-like, and then after they died, of course, the blood in the lungs would come up, and it looked like they fed. And it'd be like, whoa, there's a vampire. But the rurals weren't medical scientists. They didn't know much about it.
No. And especially, you look at, you're from Rhode Island, and you look at Rhode Island, right? And you go, wow, the history down there. You have your Native American, you got the Vikings, you got, the spirits that go back, you got the English settlers, you got King Philip's War, which we'll get to in a little bit. One of my favorite parts of American history. But what's interesting is most people don't know this, but you do, I bet. Rhode Island, besides being the vampire capital of the world, is probably also got more graveyards per capita than any other state in the Union.
Yeah, actually, they have about 3,300 and counting. We used to find them for the Great Cemetery Commission. Lena and I, in Historical Society, they go, we're looking for this person. Okay, let's get the stuff out and go. I have the Gunter's chain, which measures everything in rods.
Yep.
And that's what miles were measured, and that's what everything was measured in way back when. So that helps. And, people buried their loved ones on their property. There were no garden cemeteries until, the 1800s. And church cemeteries were small anyway. And in some cases, church cemeteries didn't come about so much later. And they gave the option of these people saying, if you want to bury, your family in the church lots, you can. But everyone buried mostly, you get these little cemeteries in the middle of nowhere. And people go, why? What's that doing there? Well, that was somebody's farm once.
Right. And they're all over.
Yeah, they could easily steal out in the middle of the night to dig up, some of the deceased to look for a vampire among them. Nobody would know.
No.
They're not going to advertise it. They're not going, what'd you do last night, John? Well, I just dug up my family looking for a vampire. What'd you do, you know?
Right, exactly. And, yeah, and they're still finding them.
Yeah, and there's the records and everything. There's plenty of records in history books, newspapers of the times, big newspapers too, family Bibles, and town hall records that actually give examples of what happened. They actually explain things like that happened. Like in Cumberland, the guy asked for permission to the town council, they granted it. In Forster, the guy went to a bunch of people, and they and it was well known that the neighborhood got together and burned the daughter, and they stood around inhaling the smoke, thinking it would cure them, and it was well documented.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, exactly, and that's why these things are easier. Once you know what you're doing, you can locate the graveyards. I mean, one of my favorite missing graveyard stories was up in Maine. You familiar with the Kennebunk Rest area?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
When you're driving up north, you notice when they tried to widen the road, they didn't do a good job near the rest area. The road leans out a little bit, the highway. It's not totally straight. You know why?
Yeah, because of that cemetery sitting there.
Right, the one right on the hill that you can see now is a Civil War veteran buried in there. At least one.
Yeah,
they found it. They were just cutting trees down, and they went, "Oops! Look what I found."
Yeah, it's kind of cool, huh? These lost cemeteries. That's how they found one of the Griswold vampire in early 1990s, like 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And John Barber, they found out through DNA testing, the cemetery was coming out of the side of sandbanks.
Oh, wow.
And they had to move it. It was an archaeological site all of a sudden, and they found one person that had been exorcised as a vampire.
Holy God.
And it's like Nicholas Bellantoni said, this is like the real deal. This is what were actual physical proofs of that this happened, other than in writing,
right?
In newspapers and stuff. This is it. They're looking at this exorcism.
No, it's very fascinating. That whole vampire thing has always fascinated me. From listening to your talks and listening to you on, different podcasts. And, of course, when you come down to the Parafest and help out with that, too, which we always greatly appreciate you and Arlene coming down.
We look forward to that all the time. It's awesome.
And speaking of the Parafest, we'll diverge for 1 minute. We are planning one for next March or April, and there'll be more coming soon. So just, keep an ear out. Keep an eye on my Facebook page. It's coming. We're not going to say where yet, but it is coming.
It's a great chance to meet everybody that you don't know. It's an awesome chance to, okay, look, you got this person. I like their books. I want to see what they got new. Or you got this person. They're really cool. They have this, that, and the other thing. Got this person. They got that. And then you get to hear the talks. I mean, yeah, it's really a great, and it's a benefit too. So you can't beat that.
No, you can't, and it's going to be
to give too.
Right, exactly, and it's always a good time. And then we get to hang out, too. We get to hang out with people we normally don't hang out because we're all so busy.
Yeah, I know. Well, at least we get to run by each other and say hi.
Right, exactly. I mean, people listening at home see how how I communicate with people on this radio, and same when Bob's here. Some of us have known each other a long time, but we don't really get to hang out much because we're always busy doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real life.
Right, and, especially starting August till, middle of November is like a blur for most of us.
Yeah.
That just flies right by. So you did that book, and then one day I think you were walking out in the woods and you found this old mill site. You want to talk about that? Because that became a book, if I remember, because I think I own that book, too.
Oh, the Ramsdale factory.
Ramsdale, yeah.
This goes back. My sister worked for a magazine, and for a few years, she was like a marketing and sales. And when she goes, I got some magazines here. She gave me a couple of them, and there was the Halloween issue, and it had this story about Pele Walker who hanged himself in this mill after getting into in 1822 after getting in an argument with the owners who he was related to by marriage. And it was a mill village. It was actually a village. I actually have a woodcut of what the village looked like.
Oh, wow.
And so then he began to haunt it, like they buried him in the not even in his family plot, in the Potter plot. And the bell began to ring, and then they removed the rope, and it kept ringing. They removed the bell. Then the mill would start up in the middle of the night, and the villagers all got afraid and ran. They took off. And finally, all the buildings fell down. The mill was burned down. And Pele can still be seen walking back and forth down the road with the candle lantern he used to carry when he was just checking things out in the middle of the night. And it became Rhode Island's officially haunted site.
Oh, wow.
And in 1885, it was mentioned as that. And it was haunted before that, obviously.
Right.
But it was tough to get people to work at it in the village. We were just there last Sunday, in fact, with the Johnson brothers and a few of the members of the Historical Society for Forster, which I'm a life member of. And it's a land trust. So you can just go right in.
Oh, okay.
And all you see is like the ruins of the factory where the wheel pit is. The ruins are what they call the Longhouse, which became the general store. A chunk of the blacksmith shop and pits where the tall house was and another house. But it's still haunted to this day. People still hear things and see things. And in fact, I talked to a couple of Foster police officers one time, and we were talking about that, and they're going, dude, I have a gun and I don't even go in there at night.
I can see why. I mean, I even get the calls from the local cops in places they won't go, and they got guns too. They're just afraid to. I mean, it is what it is. It's interesting. But
yeah. No, we've been there. May 19th is when he died, 1822, and we were there last Sunday, May 19th. It was the 202nd anniversary, so we did a little investigation there.
Yeah, why not? That's a fun time to do it. I mean, on the 100th anniversary of the Pemberton Mill disaster in Lawrence, that was about 10 years ago now. It was below zero out. The Patriots were in their first playoff game since the world was declared round before they went on that streak, if you remember that. Yeah. Guess where Essex County was? Essex County was out at the Pemberton Mill site doing an investigation.
Yeah.
In below zero weather on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And then we walked over to the boarding houses, which were near Pemberton Mill, which is Lawrence Heritage State Park, which I do a lot of paranormal talks in there, lunch talks and dinner talks and stuff. And then we walked over to City Hall, and you'd love Lawrence City Hall. The basement was its morgue for the Pemberton Mill.
Oh, wow.
It was used as a hospital and a morgue, this Lawrence City Hall in Lawrence, Massachusetts.
Oh, cool. Now, that was 2001 when you did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that night. We were at Indian Head in New Hampshire partying.
Yeah, but at least it was a lot warmer up. Well, it was cold up there, too, actually.
Yeah, we were staying for a weekend, too, but... Yeah, that it is. Those mills aren't heated, so.
Yeah, but Indian Head's an interesting location, as you know.
Yeah.
One of the
Betty and Bonnie Hill.
The Betty and Bonnie Hill location, yes.
Yeah. They got a sign right there in the parking lot.
Yep. Thanks to our good friend Mike Stevens.
Yeah.
And a few other people there. So, credit where credit is due. And so after Ram's Tale, you did a book on Haunted Mount. Did you do? Yeah, you did the Haunted White Mountains too, right? If I remember.
Yeah, well, it was called a travel guide to haunted New England, and it definitely included the White Mountains. It was designed to be where certain places like towns or areas that you could go to, stay, hang out, and just drive around for a day, a weekend, whatever, and visit all these places, investigate at them, and enjoy them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was cool. It's a really cool book because we didn't put places like Boston in there because you'll park your car after fighting traffic for an hour, and then you got to go get your car and fight traffic for an hour to go to the next, place. And so it's like, now we want a place where you can park your car for the day, park your car for the night, whatever, and just walk around all day and in a nice area that's either condensed or spend a weekend in a beautiful, larger area, like the Mohawk Trail, White Mountains.
So what is your favorite haunted spot in the White Mountains?
But my favorite spot in the White Mountains isn't necessarily haunted, it's the Willie House.
Oh, yeah, I love the Willie House. That's quite the story, isn't it?
Yeah, we actually have old souvenirs from the Willie House, like the silver coins and the old keychains from the 50s. And we were there when they found the boulder that split the avalanche. I have a rag painting. It's like on rag paper they used to make of a guy painted it. Of the Willie House before the disaster or after the disaster. Yeah, it was after the disaster, but it was a drawing that had been taken long before it, but it was painted in 1832.
All right. So for our listeners...
The Willie House disaster was 1826. So.
Right. So for our listeners that are listening now, when we do this, not everybody's from New England that listens to our great show. We know that. So why don't you explain what the Willie House is and what happened there?
In Crawford Notch, like two Crawfords lived at each end of the notch, and the Willie House became a middle house because people had to walk through it. This is the late 1700s, early 1800s. And the Willie family went in there with two hired hands, Samuel Willie and Polly Willie, like 5 children. And they began to fix it up. And they lived there, for about a year. And one day there was this giant avalanche that covered the road. And it didn't hit the house or anything. It was far away. And so, Samuel Willie and his hired hands and the Crawfords cleaned it up. And he said, well, it'll never happen again because lightning doesn't strike twice in the same area. But he built a escape cart thingy in a camp in case it should happen again. And on the night of August 26th, there was the worst storm ever in the Notch area. The Saco River rose like 12 feet or something, in some cases like 20 feet. And, the water came up to the door of the Willie House, which was which was pretty high off the ground for the Saco River to do that. And then all of a sudden, I heard this rumble, and it was the mountain coming down. They all ran out of the house to escape the avalanche that was going to crush the house because it was coming from behind. The next day, a man named John Barker came to the Willie House and saw smoke from the chimney. He went in there. He couldn't find anybody. He was so tired, he fell asleep. And then the next morning, when he woke up, he freed a few of the animals. He didn't know they were trapped because it was dark when he got there from the ruins of the barn and everything. Went over to Bartlett, got everyone else, and they started looking for the Willies. And they didn't find all of them, but they found the 2 hired hands, David Nickerson, Polly Willie, and Samuel Willie, and a few of the other kids. It took them 4 or 5 days to find them in the avalanche. There was a giant boulder behind the house that split the avalanche in half. The house never got touched.
So they left the house to get away from it, and they died.
Yeah, they were
instead of staying in the house.
The avalanche, and not a single, nothing. The house was totally unscathed.
Yeah, that is one of those great New England stories that we grow up listening to. That's what's great about living here in New England.
Yeah, I think a guy named, what was his name, Melcher. He was one of the he wrote a book. I have the original copy of it about how he helped the parties to recover some of the bodies, and then they buried them near the place. But then they removed them to a Willie family cemetery, which is now like behind a CVS and a doctor's office and everything. But I got a picture of the stone, and it has all the names on it. And then we found the other 2 hired hands in other cemeteries, family cemeteries. And it was pretty. It was one of those great White Mountain stories.
Yeah, the White Mountains leave us, pretty interesting. I mean, I would prepare to talk for a location, and then it changed because we got some weather in it, and I never rebooked it. So I'll be doing this talk sometime. It's called Cryptids of Northern New Hampshire. Okay. And they have more than just Bigfoot up there. They have this cat-like creature with a ball tail. They also got another name for it's a smaller-looking Bigfoot, and I forgot the name of it off the top of my head. But this is all in the peak. What?
Littlefoot.
No, they didn't call it Littlefoot. And I wasn't planning on talking about it, or I would have brought my notes in, because I had researched this back like 4 months ago, and my brain's just not there. I would have had because I keep my notes with me. I would have had my notes with me. But they talked about a cat-like creature with a ball tail that travels the woods. A smaller-looking Bigfoot, which I thought was real interesting. And I've talked to some Bigfoot people about it, and they've heard about it, but it's not widely written about. So that was pretty cool. But New Hampshire...
The ghost, you've heard of the ghost snowmobile of Conway?
Yeah. That's another one that's barely written about.
Yeah, I know. I researched the heck out of that, and I found it to be very fun and interesting.
Well, even some of the stuff up there in what is actually called the Lauren Coleman, another great thing he's left in... in this, we got the Bridgewater Triangle. In the Ossipee Triangle, around the Ossipee area, you got the catacombs of about 2,300 bodies that was found in Ossipee, on Snake Lake, which is a section of Ossipee Lake. Not really written about or talked about. Then you got the horse on Route 28 and 16 up there. You've heard about that one, right? Where a bunch of horsemen, they killed the guy and the horse, but his horse is seen driving back and forth from Wolfboro to Ossipee on where 28 and 16 intersect. So, there's a lot of stories up there. If you just...
Nancy's Brook.
Yeah. If you just dug a little bit, you would find. So, back to some of the other stuff you've done. So you've talked about Ram's Tail. You also did a book, if I remember correctly, on the New England coast, Pirates and... Was that you? I don't have all the books.
Pirates, Ghosts, and Phantom Ships. Yeah, Arlene and I did that one. That was like our 4th book or something.
Yeah, and I read that book. That's another great book. You want to talk? Let's talk a little bit about that. What's your favorite pirate story there in that book?
Let's see. There's a few of them. The one I thought was interesting is Nix's Mate. I always liked that one, where he was accused of murdering Captain Nix when they were in the Boston Harbor.
Okay.
And then he was hanged for it. And what happened was he swore he was innocent right to the gallows, and he said the island would, to prove his innocence, the island would disappear. And the island slowly disappeared, and now all that's left is this giant, pyramid marking the area where the island was in the harbor.
Oh, wow. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah, you gotta love these legends. And, of course, the Isles of Shoals, where Sandy Gordon and Blackbeards were, and supposedly buried treasure and married Martha Herring and that kind of thing. So I love the Isles of Shoals, too.
Yeah, that's a great area. That's got a lot of mystique. Between folklore, history, and that's where And you know what shoals mean, right?
Yeah.
The island of fish.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's it.
and then, of course, you have the Smutty Nose Murder.
Yep.
That's
Yep,
another.
and that's and Mattea, and oh God, it's Christensen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, Marin Hondvet.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite.
I actually have newspaper coverage of that in the original newspapers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the actual newspapers, like, and it's pretty cool. They covered all the way down here in Connecticut and Rhode Island.
Oh, wow. Well, that was a big thing back then. I mean,
Yeah.
people
guess
were
so.
murdered. Oof. So that was another big one. And then, of course, we got the what's-her-name house up in Hennica.
Oh, yeah, Mary. Yep, Ocean-born Mary.
Yeah. What'd you find out about her? Anything exciting?
Yeah, that she never even knew the house existed in her lifetime.
Oh.
I think her son owned it, but she never went there. The Ocean-born Mary house, where she lived, was another place. And, and the green brocade that was given to her,
Yeah.
her mom, for her wedding, a portion of it, if not all of it, is in the Historical Society.
Oh.
And yes, she was born at sea, although I think Oceanus Hopkins was the first person born at sea to come to America
Yeah.
on the Mayflower.
But she never knew about that house.
But yeah, people see her in the area. I'm sure she haunts the area because, but she never really lived in that house.
Oh, so it wouldn't be worth trying to get an investigation over that house then?
No, it's a private home. It's been for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of funny because, what was it, Louis Augustus Roy, I think his name was?
Yeah.
When he was, he has a big story on it, and he'd sell shovels to people to go dig for treasure in the back for, rent a shovel for $0.25.
Yeah.
And then people would, one time there was a story where people would, that's the rocking chair that Ocean-born Mary sat in all the time, and people would take chips out of it. And one time a reporter goes, "Aren't you afraid that you're ruining a piece of history? You're taking chips out of this rocking chair, and not going to be none left." He goes, "That's okay. I'll just replace it with another one."
Oh, wow.
Which means the rocking chair was probably not the original to begin with. So.
No, it was just an old rocking chair, and he's got people fascinated.
Yeah, he really blew up the story and everything about it, and and all that stuff at the house. But according to all the research, she never lived there. House.
I think that happens a lot more than we think.
You want to know what I found out, though?
What?
I think it's in Charleston or Little Compton. The house she actually lived in was moved years ago by some rich guy to Little Compton on Charleston, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
That's where it is now.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I bet you've driven out to seen it.
I've probably been by it 1,000 times coming from Rhode Island. I never realized it was that till I said, "Wait a minute, let's go look at it." Yeah, I know this road inside and out. It wasn't until I read it about it and found out.
Wow. That's fascinating, Tom. That really is. I mean, that's what's great about New England. I mean,
yeah.
And the not so great things about New England, how some things get blown out of proportion.
Oh, yeah, that's what makes New England so wonderful, the legends.
The legends. I mean, we got legends. There's books and books. I got books of New England legends. And
I know.
I mean,
me too.
You got books, too.
The houses at the old Sturbridge Village, they came from different areas around New England as well.
Mm-hmm.
The townhouse, I think, came from Salem, that type of thing. So it wasn't uncommon to ship houses all over the country.
Right. So you've done hauntings all over New England. Okay, so we've talked about your favorite place in New Hampshire. What's one of your favorite places in Mass?
Massachusetts. Oh my word. We love the two inns, Colonial Inn and the Public House. Colonial Inn in Concord, Mass.
Yep.
The Public House in Sturbridge, Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the Dining with the Dead 1031 investigation dinners there, and a lot of stuff happens, and they're just magical. The age, the history behind it, and we love Dogtown.
Oh, Dogtown's my favorite. I've been out there a couple times in my life by myself years and years ago. So I was very fascinated to get out there. But the Concord Colonial Inn, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe it's been now. Some of my team members actually rented a couple rooms. We rented the 2 more exciting rooms. I forgot the numbers on them. But if you go to YouTube somewhere, just Google the name, you'll see the EVP session that somebody put up that we did in there. It was quite the place. Quite the location, the room we were in and everything. We did one of the haunted rooms.
Rooms 27 and 24.
Okay, it was room 27. I think that's where the big one was. Yeah, 27. And we got quite the... and then because the team had rented 2 rooms that night and it was off-season. It was off-season, meaning they were open, but there's not a lot of people staying there that night.
Yeah.
They kind of let us walk around the public areas, and they didn't bother us. We asked permission, but they didn't care.
They actually love it.
They love it. They do love it.
We do the Dining with the Dead once a month there.
Yeah.
And give us the haunted rooms, all the haunted rooms and areas.
Right.
And we've got a lot of stuff there. We've even got videos of things happening. Water bottles moving, and it wasn't from having water on the... condensation.
Right.
Like the bottle was completely dry and the desk was dry, but it moves and someone goes, that water bottle just moved. You can see it.
Right.
Things like that. A grid on shining on the wall near the bed, and all of a sudden the shadow goes through it, and the grid's only like 2 feet from the wall.
Wow.
That kind of stuff. So, yeah, we've had so many things happen there. We were on television twice for it.
Yeah.
2 TV shows. That's how active that place is.
No, that's a very interesting place. I mean, and then the other place I stayed at, I think you stayed there too. You told me you did. I think you did. In Salem, Mass. I actually stayed in room 612. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The Hawthorne.
The Hawthorne. We had the Hawthorne for a weekend. Yeah. We did a big event there, me and another lady. And we had every room rented in the Hawthorne as far as all their ballroom space and everything. That was quite the ordeal to put together. But every time I came back into the room, we were giving tours up to the room, right?
Yeah.
Because they had given us the room that night, and I stayed in it. Every time I came back, sometimes the closet door would be open and sometimes it would be closed. And every time I left that room, I made sure the closet door was closed.
Wow. Yeah, we did the Dining with the Dead investigations there, too. We got to go back. We just had been so busy locally that I'd love to go to Salem again. We haven't been there in a couple of years, and they'd give us those rooms as well. And we found out through research and an EVP that Simon Forrester, who owned the land, is one of the ghosts that haunts the place. And he also was one of the founders of the Mariners Society that's on the roof.
Right.
And his wife was Rachel Hawthorne, or Hathorne.
Yeah.
The granddaughter of Mr. Jonathan Hawthorne.
I mean, yeah, we couldn't go into the science lab on the roof, but I mean, I did have a flare thermal imager going down the hallway, and we did pick up some interesting things at night. From the flare. From the room 612, you look down, you see
go straight down.
Right. There's a way to get there, but of course that's locked off. You can't. No one got keys to that. But
They didn't say I couldn't put a FLIR thermal imager out in the hallway and shoot it down the hallway because we had the whole floor rented.
The Mariners Club on the roof. One day they let us go in there. The guy who was the president, I guess, at the time, a couple of years ago, he not only was a musician, but he used to own in a Pig's Ear, one of our favorite places to stop at while we were in Salem. And so he's, come on up, come in. Oh, it's really cool. It's got all books from like the 1700s and everything. It's designed like a cabin of a ship.
Oh, wow. That's
we had
awesome.
to sign the log.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. So now we got Mass, New Hampshire. How about Maine?
Maine. One of our favorite places in Maine, and I love it, is the Kennebunk Inn.
Oh, yes.
We actually stayed there as part of our honeymoon. Arlene and I, when we got married in 2002, we went on a haunted honeymoon. In the Kennebunk Inn, we stayed there. It was cool.
Oh, that was awesome. So that's Maine, Mass, New Hampshire.
And also the islands out there.
Yes. Any of those islands out there have activity.
Yeah, a friend of Arlene's daughter lives in Biddeford, and her friend owned a boat. We went out there, Jewel Island. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Spent the day there, yeah. So those some places I love.
Mm-hmm. And then, so now we have Connecticut. You must have a favorite place in Connecticut, right?
Yeah. Our favorite place just happens to be down the road in Pomfret, Connecticut, called Barrahack. A village of ghostly sounds, and I've been going there for 32 years.
Wow.
And I first found out about it from reading, I later found out about it. I first found out from reading something, and then we started visiting it. And then later, when I met Paulino, he had gone there when he was like 17 as a student in college, and they had the wildest stuff happen. We began to share like our stories and say, the same thing happened to both of us in, 20-year span. And looking back, I bought Odell Shepard's Harvest of a Quiet Eye, written in 1927, and he talks about these voices of children and lowing of cows and sounds like the village is still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had an amazing experience. Paul's, they photographs of what looked like a head floating over the cemetery, and he had the same thing. They heard cows and stuff. You're in about a mile in the woods.
Right.
And we had, when I was there with a friend, and this was back, I think, in 92, we were at the cemetery. Now, the woods are sparse, and there's a trail, and we heard a wagon coming, and I thought it was the 4-H club, which is, further down the road coming through the wood. And I'm like, we'll just explain the hiking, I hope we're not trespassing. And the wagon passed by us, but we never saw a wagon.
Oh, wow.
We just heard the horses and the wheels.
Yeah, I had that. That's real interesting. That is real. I had that happen to me at Gettysburg when I was not even investigating. We went out there for a school field trip.
And
yeah. Forget that wasn't even an investigation. That was a school field trip.
I
want to take a moment. You brought up something. I should have done this earlier, but take a moment here to remember a legend like Paulino. We've known him a long time. It was sad year this year. We lost. It can never be replaced in this field. He'll never be replaced.
No, a pioneer, a brilliant person, one of the only parapsychologists in the world.
Yeah.
A brilliant mind, really, really put forth lots of hypotheses and theories and proves a lot of stuff to be, this is scientifically and, oh, God, yeah.
Many a conversation.
He's one of my biggest heroes ever.
Right. Many conversations I had. Yeah, good friend, too. I had many conversations with him over the phone about some of my own cases and some of my own theories that I was developing along the way. And he'd always listen, always respectful. and he
Yeah.
tell you what he thought of it, and in a very respectable manner. And him and I bounced a lot of great ideas off of each other too. And you have too. Anybody that knew Paul knew that Paul loved bouncing ideas. He never rushed anybody off a phone.
That's what made him so brilliant, is because he never closed his mind.
Right. He kept his mind wide open to whatever's out there. Could be anything. So yeah, we lost a legend in this field. So with that, so we got Connecticut covered. Rhode Island is probably Ram's Tail for you, right? I'm assuming.
Most definitely, yeah.
So we covered all of New England with Tom D'Agostino and his favorite.
Except Vermont.
Oh, Vermont. Yeah, how about Vermont?
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Oh, okay.
That's what I think. Oh, I know. Spice Cemetery, Bailey's Mills, bed and breakfast in Spice Cemetery.
Okay. Sounds like a great. What's up there for excitement?
Well, Bailey's Mills, the guy, he was an entrepreneur, and he had a piece of land, and he built a mill on it, and he wanted to expand, but his neighbor Hapgood said, "No, I don't like you, and you're not taking." Bailey was one of these guys where one time he had a general store with the mill, so he'd pay you in money that you was good at the general store. So you had to, most of the time when you got paid, you could buy stuff elsewhere with most of the money, with some of the money, I mean, but a lot of his script was only good for his store, so we could recoup it. And one time a kid came in and wanted a pickle, and it was a penny, and the kid shoveled through everything, picked the biggest pickle out, handed Bailey a penny. Bailey grabbed the pickle, looked at it, and said it was too big for a penny, and took a bite out of it and gave it back to him.
Oh, wow.
That's the kind of guy he was. Well, Hapgood didn't want to give any of the land to him. He's like, you're not getting my land.
Right.
And he said, well, you know what? You're an old man. You're going to die soon, and I'm going to have your land. Well, Hapgood dies. And Bailey's like, good, I'm going to get this land. And what happens? He looks out his door one day, and there's a gravestone right in front of his house. Hapgood, when he died, gave the land to this town to make a graveyard.
Oh, yeah, so no one got the land but the town.
The stone was right there. And now, there's a little road. This is in the middle of nowhere. So this Bailey's Mill, it's haunted. And the cemetery, when Bailey died, he finally was buried in that cemetery, too. So he did get a little piece of land. It was called Spike Cemetery for that reason.
Oh, God. Another great New England story. Happens all the time in New England. We love our New England. Speaking of New England, let's get on with some of. You actually did a book recently that came out, I believe you said last August, called New England Haunted Route 44. You want to talk a little bit about Haunted Route 44?
Yeah, I grew up right off of Route 44, like Greenville Ave, which is Route 44. Then you take Greenville Ave and about 2 side streets down, you're at our house. And then my whole life since, I've either lived on Route 44 or right off Route 44. And we live right off Route 44 now in Connecticut. And so this all traveling and everything, I mean, I collected all these stories, these legends and whatnot. And we wanted to write a book about a haunted road trip. We said, let's do a road trip. We looked at all these highways and byways and all this. And Route 44 runs 237 miles from Plymouth, Massachusetts to Cohasset, New York, straight through Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Now we're like, and I already knew a ton of this ghosts and haunts on, along this road or just off it. So we started traveling and to pick up more of the stuff that we knew about, but didn't have pictures of and stuff. I mean, stories like the Headless Horseman of Canton, one of the most haunted houses, supposedly the Huguenot House in East Hartford, and Martin, I think it was Martin Park, yeah. And all these places like that, like the Hartford State House, going into the Bridgewater Triangle, Massachusetts,
Right.
Anawan Rock, Rehoboth, all that right there. Plymouth alone, there's like a dozen places. And then shooting into Rhode Island, you got Providence and Smithfield, which is wicked cool because it has a bunch of haunts in it. Going into Gloucester, where you got that one stretch on Route 44 that has like 4 buildings in a row that are haunted. Because it's real old. That's very old. And the Gloucester Ghoul, which H.P. Lovecraft referred to as it. I mean, and then it just keeps going and going.
Now, on this Route 44, I forgot, I haven't read this book yet, Tom. I've been trying to get it, but just with no luck. But I'll get it, because I have all your books anyhow. But I read it.
It's hardcover, too.
Oh, it is? That's even better.
Optional hardcover.
Oh, good. I'll take the option on the hardcover.
I gotta buy one.
I was reading, and I forgot what book this was, and this might have been in Haunted Massachusetts, so I'm not sure. And I know it was out on Route 44, somewhere near the New York border. A young couple was driving home one night, and they were listening to the Red Sox and the Yankees. Have you heard this story?
I have.
Was that on Route 44? Am I right? Is my memory serving me right?
Well, if it's New York, it'd be Connecticut, so it could be.
And it was a small town. They were listening to the Red Sox and the Yankees, and all of a sudden, George Herman Babe Ruth came up to bat. This was like in the 80s. We all know Babe Ruth was gone by then.
Oh, yes, I have heard that. It was like a time flux or a radio wave that bounced back and just happened to hit them right there at that time. They were listening to the same radio station.
So that's what happened there then. Okay.
And also, I know that happened somewhere else a long time ago, and I'm talking like in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Out of where that, and they all of a sudden they were getting this reception from the 1950s. I think it was in Texas, though.
Oh, okay. So this does happen every so often.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon. It's a weird phenomenon, but I guess, radio waves, that's what, they go out, they come back.
Right. Exactly. Now, have you ever ran into the red-headed hitchhiker?
No, but I used to drive that road, that part of 44, a few times a week because we owned a sporting goods shop. And we sold live bait. And Tom's Wholesale Bait was in Middleborough, Mass, off of Route 44. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
And I'd have to drive from Smithfield, Rhode Island, on Route 44, where our store was actually on Route 44, too.
Wow.
Out to Middleborough. So I must have passed that red-headed hitchhiker place like 100 times and never saw it. And if I did, I wouldn't remember, but I don't think I would forget. But even if I did see someone hitchhiking, I wouldn't have stopped to pick them up anyway because the car was full of shiners and bait.
Right.
So I never saw them that I know of.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's one of those great stories of Haunted Route 44.
It's world-renowned.
World-renowned Haunted Route 44. And we come to your new book, which I saved to the end. Because we're going to have you back on again when we get the Bob, and when we're going to start going live probably in a month or so. This podcast will go live. We're going to have you back on, but we're talking right now about one of my favorite times in American history. Growing up in the Merrimack River Valley, you don't really think of this much, but King Philip's War and the French-Indian War period. But I grew up in Methuen. Hannah Dustin's right next door in Haverhill. And Robert Rogers was born in my hometown of Methuen, who was a hero at the end of the French-Indian War. He's the one that sacked St. Francis Village under General Abercrombie. So you don't really think of it because most of King Philip's War and the Indian Wars took place on the Connecticut River Valley and in haunted southeastern Massachusetts. But you got a great book that's coming out, already came out. No, coming out in July. Wow.
Right. Yeah, July 22nd.
Yeah, that's a little over a month away.
And we went all over the place looking for some legends and and ghost haunted places and ghost stories that have to do with King Philip's War. And we found a ton of them. And of course, I also had to revert to my library downstairs, which has books from the 1800s and stuff, which have Increase Mather's book on King Philip's War, a copy of it.
Yeah.
And it's not the original, obviously,
No.
but it's a copy of it from the 1800s. And things like that. So I'm reading all these things, and what a brutal war. And so we had to go to some of these places and actually see what they look like and visit them and, hear some of the stories. And it was amazing. It just, wow, because it wasn't a war where soldiers were fighting. It was two different cultures or civilizations trying to annihilate each other.
Yes. And up our way was Judge Saltonstall from the Salem witch hysteria. And the Saltonstall family, Colonel Saltonstall, said that this was the bloodiest battle in American history. More men and women died more men died per capita than any other war that was ever fought.
Yeah, in fact, it's a little over twice as much as the Civil War.
Yes.
How many people died per capita? Because they were just annihilating women, children, non-combatants, old men, whatever. They were raiding villages, they were raiding camps, you name it. There was no battlefield. Anywhere was a battlefield at any time.
Right, just
boy, did it leave a scar on the land.
It did. I mean, Providence, Rhode Island stayed vacant for over 10 years before they resettled. Haverhill had...
Oh, go ahead.
The other side of that war, Haverhill was attacked twice. And, I mean, maybe actually more than twice, but the two biggest one was 1709 and 1698, which is King William's War and the end of the French Indian War. But that left an indelible mark. There was 42 people killed in two battles. Plus,
what I found out and through researching is King Philip's War effectively ended in 1676 as far as major battles go.
Right.
But it wasn't then in 1678 they had the Treaty of Casco Bay, but that didn't end anything.
No.
They were still attacking in the 1690s, and then the French come in, and you got the Queen Anne's War, and the Indians were like, wow, so King Philip's War did not just end in 1676. It went on for years and years and years as an extension, even though he was dead. Yeah, Deerfield was raided twice.
Right, exactly. Deerfield was wiped out. I mean, there's a great, and I forgot where I read this. It's in one of my talks, because I do a talk on the historical aspect of this whole war, including Rogers, and my talk's about an hour and a half long. I do a historical talk on this time period, and I usually research the town I'm doing it in, so I also talk about the town. But in general terms of speaking, where was I going with that? Was it? Oh, I know what it was. The Treaty of, and I always screw up these treaties' names. Riceburg. Was it the ink wasn't even dried, and we were going into the 7 Years' War because they couldn't stop fighting.
Right. Well, the Indians or the indigenous people will say,
yes,
and the French were driven out of the area by the English, so naturally they're both going to get together and say, "Hey, you know what? These guys drove both of us out. We're both, got something against them. Let's go."
Right.
And they call both sides and go, yeah.
And then down near you, I believe, because I don't travel much to Connecticut. I've been there once or twice, I'll be honest with you. I got to get down there more because there's a huge French Indian War site down there. There's a monument. Is it Connecticut? Yeah, Connecticut. About a battle down there. You know what I'm talking about?
I think it's where Mcdermott and Uncas. No, that would be before that. I'm trying to think now. I think
Mystic. I think it's near Mystic, Connecticut. Because someone told me to go try Mystic Pizza while I was down there.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and it's also a giant Revolutionary War site in Groton.
Okay.
But all right, yeah, Mystic, Connecticut. There is a monument to the war, Korean War, because Connecticut saw a lot of it on the eastern part of it because it abutted Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Massachusetts was just above it there.
Right.
So that was pretty thick in it. The western side wasn't too much, but the eastern side, yeah. And you had the Narragansetts over there, you know, and the Nipmucks, and oh my God, and the Mohicans, and
oh yeah, no, it was bloody. So, what did you find for haunted locations?
Oh God,
we want people to read the book, but let's talk maybe one or two good ones so people can go buy this book on July 22nd.
All right, I know one of the coolest ones is in Berkeley, Mass, where a man named I keep wanting to say John Stebbins now because I was thinking about him because he came out of two of the he was in two of the big battles and was taken prisoner, and he was actually shot and everything, and came out of one battle where everyone was just about killed, and he came out of it with unscathed. Anyway, his dog, this guy, God, I know it wasn't John, and I got his name. It's in my head. This is what happens when you got the flu. Anyway, in Berkeley on the Berkeley Ridge area, he there's a actual marker there where he was after they went to Taunton. The war just started. He brought his family to Taunton, went back to get some provisions, and then Bobbitt, that's his name, and it's spelled in different ways. And Mr. Bobbitt, and on the way back, he encountered some Indians, and he ran up a tree to hide. But the dog started barking, and they knew where he was, and they shot him, and shot into the tree, and he was killed. And then they mutilated him, and the ghost of the dog is heard barking all the time over there now. That's a really cool one.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yep. And of course, Anawan Rock is another cool one. Everyone knows Anawan Rock.
Right.
Haunted by where Chief Anawan was finally captured with his small group. And he didn't even put up a battle. A lot of people, say, Ayutash, which is stand and fight or fight stoutly, in translation. But they never even got a chance to put up a fight. They were sneaked up upon and boom. That's another one. Plymouth, the old burial ground, is haunted because that's where Anawan, Chispapin, and King Philip's heads were hung for years.
Yeah.
And they say there's puck orgies in there too.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got all of that. Bridgewater Triangle, anywhere in there, Hockomock Swamp. Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
And we found tons and tons of places that were either barely written about or never written about.
Wow, I can't wait till that book comes out. And I know my listeners are listening here going, July 22nd. Mark that on the calendar and start Xing those days off.
Another road trip.
Another road trip, yes. Well, Tom, we've come to the end of a great show. I want to thank you for coming on this week. We greatly appreciate it. We will have you back because you're full of knowledge. So I want to thank you, and I hope you feel better soon. And we'll be talking real soon, my friend. So thank you very much, and have a good night. To my great listeners, Bob will be back soon. We have some great shows being planned. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. And let's enjoy the rest of this Memorial Day weekend. Happy Memorial Day. Oh, and good night. And before I forget, tomorrow in Newburyport, if you have an animal, Sunday, the day before Memorial Day, there's going to be an animal psychic reading show in Newburyport. You can check that out on the Essex County Facebook page. So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Tom. Have a good evening, everybody, and we'll see you soon in the paranormal. Good.